Okay, in the last video I showed you how to add this sky as a background. Okay, you can see over here that it's on its own layer. It can be turned on and off independent of the actual rendering here. And now we want to do something similar. I want to take another photograph, only I'm going to use it to help cover up some of this grass, to make the grass look a little more realistic. So first thing to do, we want to go to the internet. I've already done a search here for a grass field, and don't forget that you can turn on the tools and change the size so that you only receive pictures that are large or medium or whatever it is you're searching for. Okay, in this case, like I said, I searched for grass field, but you could have searched for a golf course, a park, just regular grass, anything you want. This is the picture that I'm going to go with. I like it because it's got so much grass without a lot of things in the way here. And don't worry about what's going on in the background. Okay, we can fix that in Photoshop. So now I'm going to right click, copy the image. I'll go back to Photoshop, and with Control and V, that's going to paste this in as a new layer. You can see that indeed this is a large image. In fact, it's much larger than my actual rendering. And that's because my rendering is not really a high quality rendering. Your final rendering should be much bigger, and you won't have this problem. But this isn't necessarily a problem, because I can always resize the image, and in fact you'll probably have to. Control T is the shortcut for free transform, and what this lets me do is grab the grips on the corners here. You can see where the perimeter of the actual picture is, and by holding down Shift I'm constraining proportions, but I'm just reducing this thing proportionally. Okay, and I can reposition. You can grab it in the middle here, but you won't be able to hold down Shift if you do that. So if you want those constrained proportions, which isn't always necessary, make sure you grab this thing in the corner. Okay, and when you like it, it doesn't need to be an exact match, just when you start to like it, then you can either hit Enter or select the check mark up here on the ribbon. Okay, I like it about there, and one other thing I want to add here is that by going to Edit, Transform, you could use the Distort, Skew, Perspective, Warp, any of these others that might help you. I just want you to experiment with them. I won't show them to you, but they might help you to adjust the direction of the grass. Sometimes you're going to get mow lines, and if they all run this direction and yet your house is over here or in the wrong spot, those tools can be handy too. Okay, now the next step is that we're going to add a layer mask here. Okay, right now, like I mentioned, there's all this stuff going on in the background that we of course don't need, and there's an easy way to get rid of this, which is to come over here in your layers palette. Down at the bottom you've got what's called a layer mask, and it looks like a white rectangle with a black circle inside of it. Click on that and notice that you get this little white box thumbnail next to the thumbnail for that layer. Okay, you can make the layer active or the layer mask active, and it's really important to pay attention to which one is active, because what we're about to do won't work if you've got the actual layer itself active. So make sure this is highlighted. Okay, and the way I like to describe this is that layer mask is a bunch of white masking tape that we just placed over this entire layer, and we did that to protect it. Okay, anything that you want to protect, it needs to show up as white over here. Anything you don't want to protect, we're going to peel away that layer mask or that tape, and that'll make it go away. That'll make the entire portion of this layer go away. And you peel it back by using the brush tool. It's found over here in Tools, or you can just push B. Okay, but with this brush tool active, I got to use one of two colors to cover this thing up. And let me just switch back to default here. So you notice that I've got, on the left hand side, I got a white color and a black color. Whichever one's on top is the active color. It also shows up over here in the colors palette if that's open. Okay, if I hit X, then it'll switch the active color. You could also click on this little icon if it's available to you. I noticed in the labs that it wasn't, so I'm just hitting X. Okay, and if I use black, then I'm painting black over this white mask, which means I'm pulling the tape away. If I paint white, then nothing's going to happen unless it's already black, and then I'm putting tape back on. Okay, my brush looks really small right now, so to fix that you can right click and change the size. You can just click out here in the gray once you like it. Okay, or you can use the brackets on your keyboard, which show up right below spacebar and the equals sign. There's a left bracket, right bracket. Right bracket enlarges, Left bracket makes it a little bit smaller. Okay, and like I said, if I paint now with that white brush, no effect. If we switch it, remember X, now I'm painting in black, and watch what's going to happen. Okay, that layer is going away, and you can see the black stroke that I just made over here in my thumbnail, indicating I just peeled away the masking tape. Okay, remember masking tape usually is there to protect something, to preserve something. So we're just peeling it back. We don't want any of this top portion to have any of that masking. And I can also tell right now that what I'm using is called a soft brush. If you right click, see the hardness setting here. Soft means that the edges aren't real crisp. They just kind of gradually feather out or gradate. And you may want for this exercise a slightly harder brush. We get more crisp edges. Okay, and I'm going to go down far enough just to get rid of that sky. Show most of my horizon from the other picture, the sky background picture here. But I don't want to go too far. I don't want to get below the house here. Or at least not into the rendered grass like I just did. If I do go too far, all I have to do is hit X again, and we paint back on with a white brush. Like so. Okay, perfect. Right in there is great. And of course, at this point, the picture looks ridiculous. We're not going to leave it this way. If we did, then we've lost the mound, we've lost the shadows. So if I turn this off, you can see all the good stuff that we're losing. And there's nothing realistic about what I've just done here. So we're not going to leave it that way. In fact, we're going to take that layer and let's move it below the rendering. Okay, that makes it go away entirely, of course. You don't see it now. And the next step would be to go add yet another layer mask. Only this time, we're going to add it to the actual rendering itself. So if you'll just click on the rendering layer. Okay, this is a very important step. None of this is going to work out if you don't switch back to the top layer here. Okay, now we're going to add a new layer mask, and it shows up in white all over again. Okay, if I wanted this grass to go away, then we'd do the same thing as last time. We'd paint with X, and we'd bring that other grass forward because, sorry, we wouldn't paint with X. We'd bring up the paintbrush tool and we'd hit X to use the black color. And as I use the black, you can see grass showing through. It's a little bit too much, right? It doesn't look like it's part of this picture or that it ever should have been. So here's what I'll do first. Turn off the top layer. I'm going to go to this other layer, and I'm going to use Control U, or hue and saturation, to just make the color seem a little bit greener. Okay, and I never know what's going to do this. Just take that top slider and just move it back and forth until you find something that you kind of like. This is a good one. Okay, it's a little bit greener now. You can also dial up the saturation if you need to. And I'll accept this. We say OK. And turn this back on. And that's a closer match. I mean, it's not perfect, but it is a closer match. By the way, you don't even have to turn this layer off. Okay, I could, as long as the second layer is active, I can do this to where I kind of see them together and get just the right green. I'm liking it right in there. That's perfect. Okay, not that that makes it feel right. The colors are a good match. It still doesn't feel like it should be there. Not in this image just yet. The scale's a little bit off, and we get weird transition if I keep going here between the real grass and the fake grass. So, I'm making lots of mistakes here. See how difficult it is. You got to make sure you're on the right layer mask. What I mean to be doing is painting on this top layer mask with the black brush, so you can see more of the real grass behind it. Now, because this isn't ever going to work for me, I got to come up with a different solution. What I'm trying to accomplish here is to show some of the real grass, some of the fake grass. That way I preserve the shadow, and when the two merge together, it makes it feel like it was always intended to be there. Sometimes real grass with fake rendering, they never merge. They just never feel like they were meant for each other. So we go with what's called a transparency. Now, if black covers up the rendering and white preserves it, then a gray somewhere in between will show part of the rendering and part of the grass. Okay, it's the same thing as a transparent layer mask. And now these two start to work. Oh, sorry, wife's calling me. Now you can see that that's looking much better. Yeah, we lose quite a bit of shadow, and I'm going to have to live with that. And I can always go with a lighter color there too. I can always say, well, actually I want to show more of the shadow through here. And also don't forget to shrink the size of that brush. Okay. And see how those two are just really coming together. Even little things like the leaves sitting here in the grass. And I might even zoom in on those and change my brush to be entirely black. And if I do that and shrink it down, then I can just click on that little leaf and make it come through all the way, make it look a little more realistic. Okay, and then of course I've got to do that in selective areas. It's going to be a little bit harder to do it around these bushes, around each blade of grass. And something I might do is just kind of go around the blades, but don't try to get in between them very much. I mean, already I can barely tell back in here the difference between real grass and fake grass. And the other thing is to right click at this point and make that brush really soft. Okay, if that's a nice soft brush through here, then I don't get the crisp edge that makes it real easy to see the transitions between real and fake. Okay, so something like that. And look over here at my preview and you can see what it's doing here. We're just getting gray in select areas that allow part of that rendered grass to disappear. Okay, same thing back through here. Now I'm going to do this area. And a little trick at an edge like this. If you'll just click here, move your cursor to the other side, now hold down Shift before you click. I've got Shift pressed down and I'm holding it, and then I click, and it just moves from one click all the way to the other and covers that area without me relying on a brush stroke. Okay, I'll do it again over here. I'm going to move to the other edge, hold down Shift, and then click, and it just did everything in between. Everything in between the two clicks. Okay, a little bit through here. If I've gone too far, I can always go back to a white, and I can just remove it. And then of course in some areas you're going to have to really zoom in so you can get some of those little fine details and smaller spaces. There we go. Okay, at that point I think it looks great. Okay, maybe a little more work in here, but you can see that with just a little bit of effort we've accomplished quite a lot. And over here now I've got all three layers and they're all working in tandem. Now before I finish this video, I might just add one more thing, and that is that I changed the color a little bit and maybe even the brightness just a touch on this second layer, which is the grass. I may want to go do that to the first layer too. Make sure that that top layer is the active one before you do this. But now if I want to just brighten the whole thing up a little bit, I might just click here and go into those levels and make sure that I've got them set right. And somewhere in there starts to look good. And we're done.